Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The AC was humming when the Uber pulled away, but the house felt wrong cold in a way that didn't come from air, the kind of cold you notice in churches and waiting rooms. I set my suitcase on the mat and breathed in. Not my lemon cleaner, not coffee. Something labeled fresh linen if you asked, a candle catalog, plus a top note of brand new paint. Home, I said out loud, because sometimes the word reminds the place what it is. The entryway mirror had moved 2 inches left. I'm the only person who would notice a lifetime of hanging frames with a bent tape measure will teach you what centered actually means. The ficus I'd been coaxing through a Texas summer was gone from its corner. In its place sat a matte white vase with eucalyptus spray, like a Pinterest photograph. Evelyn Brielle called from upstairs light as the perfume trailing down the stairwell. "You're back early." "I got a cheaper flight," I said. Cheaper means early. I wheeled past the kitchen, new bar stools, ghost white legs like stiletto heels. The pot rack was empty. Pans that used to clatter a welcome were missing their dull metal shine. "Hold on," Brielle sang. "Don't go up yet. It's a surprise." I kept walking. The hallway was brighter than it had any right to be. Someone had swapped warm bulbs for daylight LEDs. When I reached the master door, my palm paused on a knob that used to be brass and now was brushed steel, cool as a stranger's handshake. The room was a magazine. A white platform bed floated in the center, made so tightly the quilt could have been a photograph. Except it wasn't my quilt. Mine was pieced from cut-up dresses and shirts hand-stitched under a cheap lamp during double shifts. This one was ivory with a faint grid like a designer's graph paper. The peach walls Frank and I once painted on a Sunday were gone, traded for a color called agreeable gray, if I had to guess. Our Polaroid from the courthouse wedding missing. The nail holes, even those, were spackled smooth. My bed of 20 years, the mahogany frame Frank sanded twice and declared finished, was nowhere. The dresser with walnut pulls my mother's hand on every drawer not in sight. The smell wasn't ours. The sound wasn't ours either. Even silence has a memory if you live in it long enough. Brielle appeared in the doorway in a white linen dress, all breezy jokes and perfect teeth. "Well, isn't it zen?" She gestured like a realtor who'd taught herself to smile with her eyebrows. The old setup was heavy. "This breathes." "Where is my bed?" I said. "In the garage," she said gently, like you talk to people near a ledge. "Everything's wrapped. We wanted to protect your things. And we moved you to the front room. You won't have to climb stairs every day. It's safer." My hands found each other and stayed put. My photos. "We digitized most," Brielle brightened. "They look incredible in black and white, minimal. We can do a gallery wall for you downstairs." I made a mood board. "I don't need a mood board," I said. "I need what was on these walls." Jason shuffled in behind her, hair pushed up like he'd slept at 3 p.m. Team hoodie, flip-flops. He took one look at the white bed and then at me and decided to study the baseboard. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Jason," I answered, and heard my voice do a thing it does when I'm calculating instead of grieving. "You can grieve later in the laundry room where grief belongs." "Whose idea?" "We've been talking about lighting and space," Brielle said before he could. "Jason's tools are everywhere in the guest room. This gets us organized. We paid for everything ourselves. And look, the natural light here, it's better for my content." The old walls reflected red. "And my content?" I asked. "Your content is like home, right?" Brielle smiled. "This is still your home." Jason hit her with a look that meant, "Not now." He scratched the back of his neck the way he did at 12 when he lied about eating the cookies before dinner. "Mom, we wanted it to be a welcome home thing." "Surprise." "It is a surprise," I said. I stepped farther in. The closet doors were open to a parade of dresses that didn't belong to me. Cream camel blush. Purses perched in a neat row like loaves of expensive bread. In the middle of the floor sat a white desk with a glass top, a ring light clipped on his halo, waiting for a face. "Where are my boxes?" I said. "In the garage," Brielle repeated, labeled. "And the quilt." She blinked. "Which? Oh, the patchwork. It didn't fit the vibe. I had it dry cleaned. It's in a storage bin so it doesn't get dusty." I looked again at the bed that had no past and let my jaw settle where it wanted. "You want a space all to yourself," I said, and my tone was not a question. "Whoa." Brielle nodded, relieved at the bridge she thought I was building. "Yes, boundaries, healthy ones." "My therapist says," "Good," I said. "Then you can start looking for a place that has yours." Her mouth stayed open around a word that didn't survive the air. Jason let out a small, useless laugh that wasn't humor. "Mom, you moved me without asking," I said. "You took my room, my paint, my pictures, and you told the house to forget everything it knew. I'm asking for nothing you don't already understand. If you need your own space, find it." Brielle recovered fast. Some people learn to surf a wave before they learn why the water moves. That's not fair, she said. Jason is your son. This is his home too. I paid for it, I said. With diner tips and sore feet and half a lifetime. This deed has one name on it. Let's go downstairs, Jason said, palms up. We can talk like adults. That would be a change, I said, and walked out. On the landing, the light hit the stair wall where the family photos had once climbed like a ladder. First day of school haircuts, Halloween capes, Frank grinning with a socket wrench. Now the wall was a rectangle of pale calm, nothing to catch the eye. I missed the chaos of it, the way frames tilt after a football catches them, the way a wall speaks when it's crowded. The kitchen echoed. New stools do that, they don't absorb sound yet. I opened the silverware drawer and the forks were wrapped in a linen roll like they were auditioning for a food magazine. I unrolled them and set one on the counter because that's how a fork lives in my house. Brielle arrived with her phone face down the way you do when you don't want a screen to betray you. Jason leaned against the fridge and tried to look like Switzerland. We didn't mean to upset you, he said. It's just stuff. It's not, I said, and you know it. Silence. The AC knocked in the attic, a metal hiccup I'd meant to ask a man from church to look at weeks ago. I pulled the freezer open and found a tray of ice cubes, shaped like perfect spheres. I don't know where my son learned to want round ice. It wasn't in our kitchen. Where are my pans, I asked. Brielle gestured up. Top cabinet to keep the counter clean. I swapped in ceramic. Teflon is toxic. You can leave my cast iron where it lives, I said. It's older than you. She colored, then straightened. We're adults, Evelyn. We made adult decisions about flow and function. The guest room is closer to the hall bath. It makes sense. Sense, I repeated. The word tasted like chalk. I walked to the mudroom where the garage door sticks if you don't lift as you pull. The handle had a new plate, brushed steel again. I tugged and felt the same old bite in the hinge. The garage smelled like August and cardboard. My dresser leaned sideways under a moving blanket. Sharpie labels shouted in tidy handwriting. Memory boxes, linens, mess. The quilt bin sat on top, lid snapped crooked. I pressed it down and heard the click. In another tub, a picture frame rattled the glass, spidered into shiny frost. On the workbench, someone had left a stack of envelopes. HOA mailers, 2 of them addressed to homeowner. The top letter was bright and polite, the kind of tone that smiles while it finds you. I slid a fingernail under the flap and read, Notice of unapproved exterior modification. Photographs attached. Remedy within 14 days to avoid escalation. Attached was a color printout the front porch with a new light fixture. I hadn't approved a concrete planter box where the ficus used to be a paint swatch strip held against brick. In the margin, a ballpoint note in a loopy hand, we can fight this, Caroline. I set the notice down on the bench next to a roll of packing tape and listened to the house through the drywall, Jason clearing his throat in the kitchen, Brielle's heels searching for a softer floor. The AC hummed steady. Somewhere a drip clicked in the water heater pan. I touched the edge of the dresser, felt the nick. Frank never bothered to sand out and let my fingers rest there until the cool of the wood came back to me. The garage air tasted like cardboard in August. I slid the HOA notice back into its envelope and balanced it beneath the packing tape. When I turned, a plastic bin labeled memory boxes wobbled on the dresser. I steadied it with my palm. The lid wasn't snapped on right because the quilt's corners pressed against it. Someone had folded history wrong. I carried the envelope and the quilt bin to the mudroom and shouldered the sticky door until it caught. Brielle's heels clicked once in the kitchen and then paused. You can tell when a person is listening for your opinion. I gave her nothing but the sound of the bin on tile and walked past her to the living room. The doorbell camera's chime is a small wooden sound Frank used to like. He said it made the porch feel like a country store. I opened the app on my phone, the one Nora had installed for me, and set to big text. The timeline was a neat ladder of timestamps. Tuesday last week. Package. Wednesday, motion. Thursday, visitor. I tapped visitor. The tiny round lens showed the porch and a slice of sidewalk. Brielle stood on the top step with her cell angled just so, speaking in her bright customer voice. Hi, I have the R-on link if we need to use remote, she told someone off camera. A woman's tone, polite and brisk, answered. If the signer's present, we won't need remote. We'll do a wet signature. The stranger stepped into view, black polo with a stitched logo that read, ATX Mobile Notary, clipboard stamped tidy hair. She smiled toward the gap of the open door like a waitress introducing the specials. Jason Brielle called over her shoulder in the clip sing-song suite. Bring the IDs. The footage had no interior audio. The camera only hears the porch. But I could see the edge of my ficus pot in the frame. No ficus anymore, just a concrete rectangle I never bought. The notary checked a driver's license, nodded, wrote something, then glanced straight at the lens as if noticing she was on it. The timestamp burned into the bottom, 11:27 a.m. 2 minutes later, she angled the clipboard for someone inside, then pressed her seal and smiled her professional goodbye. I scrubbed back 3 hours. Another clip. Brielle, alone this time, phoned to her ear, toe-tapping the metal threshold. "Mom, Ron is legal here," she said to Caroline with that same honeyed insistence she saves for brand reps. "It's faster, and she never checks email anyway. We just need the DocuSign to route." She listened. Okay, calm down. Jason's got it." I let the phone rest against my leg. The house hum filled the space around me. The AC, the refrigerator, what distance sounds like when people you raised are on the other side of a wall choosing words. In the dining room, a white envelope sat where the mail used to stack. Neighborhood Trust Bank. I opened it. Inside was a polite letter with a barcode stripe. "Thank you for choosing Neighborhood Trust for your home equity needs. Your HELOC application is pending additional verification." There was a QR code and a sentence that mentioned signature received ID review in progress. On the buffet, someone had arranged a scheme of glass cylinders and a single branch. I set the letter down and reached for the drawer where Frank kept a cheap ballpoint. The drawer held cork coasters, soy candles, and a packet of brass picture hooks I didn't buy. I used my own pen from my purse. 11:27 a.m., ATX Mobile Notary Porch. HELOC letter pending. I wrote the notary's company name exactly as the polo had spelled it because exact spelling is a shortcut to the future. Jason stared at the TV with nothing on. Brielle pretended to text. I carried the letter to the kitchen and said, "Where did you put my file box?" "In the hall closet," Jason said. "We organized." The hall closet smelled like dryer sheets that never met a dryer. My fireproof file box sat on the floor where the vacuum used to live. I set it on the console table and opened the lid. The hinge squeaked the way hinges squeak in houses that were assembled on weekends. Deed insurance tax parcels, bright sticky notes in my handwriting from 10 years ago that said things like, "Call Norma and keep this." The deed was sheathed in a plastic sleeve like a school report. I slipped it out. Evelyn M. Carter, a widow, separate property. Paragraph after paragraph of language my old notary had read out loud slow so I'd hear it twice. Any encumbrance, lien, conveyance, or security interest requires the voluntary notarized signature of the owner with 2 disinterested witnesses. The last page showed my name in a curved line I don't especially like, a notary seal from a decade back, and 2 signatures that belonged to women from church who cry at baptisms. Frank's name appeared only in the clause that said spousal interest waived by affidavit. His signature, neat and stubborn, carried a different date because life likes to do that to you. I set the deed next to the HELOC letter and took a picture of both with my phone. Nora had taught me to photograph paper in bright light with the phone flat. "Flat means truth," she said. I held the corners down and heard the shutter tick. The top of the file box hid other small histories. A library card with my maiden name. A notary receipt for the old will we had fixed after Frank's diagnosis. Behind those, a folded city permit from years ago for a fence that we never built because summers get away from you. I found the home insurance declarations page and ran my finger down the coverage sections until I reached a phone number. The insurance lady asked for my policy number and then asked me if I was safe. I told her yes. She asked me if I wanted to add a fraud alert to the account. Yes, I said. She asked if anyone had attempted to contact the carrier to add a lien holder. "We have a note," she said, "that a lender requested mortgagee clause info 2 days ago." "Who?" I said. "Neighborhood Trust Bank," she said. I thanked her and wrote that down. When I hung up, I turned on the kitchen lamp over the sink, the one with a warm bulb they hadn't found yet, and breathed until the light settled the room. In the office corner, once a reading nook, now a white desk. You could see the edges of a mood board Brielle had taped inside a drawer, gray swatches with chummy names clippings from a magazine, a pseudo-handwritten note that said studio goals. People like to plan their lives and then insist the plan is the life. I eased the drawer open and left it there. On the counter, a receipt stuck out of a canvas tote. Home Depot, with the numbers dancing the way numbers do when people have convinced themselves the price is a vote on taste. Swiss coffee 2 gal. Agreeable gray 2 gal. Contractor pack cabinet pulls 12. Permit fee City of Austin online. Then, in smaller type, permit application rejected missing owner authorization. A second slip stapled to the first said Augusta Interiors, with a tidy logo and a balance due that could have paid a semester of community college. I took a photograph of the receipt and set it back exactly askew. The laptop on the white desk blinked with a sleeping light. I don't open other people's machines. The things you learn that way are the wrong ones. I pressed the spacebar once to wake the clock and read the upper right corner where the Wi-Fi name sits, like a label on a jar. East Side Co-op Guest. In the kitchen, the home router still blinked Carter's Wi-Fi, steady as always. East Side Co-op meant someone had taken a computer to a co-working space recently. The shape of this thought made my mouth go dry. I opened my email. Nora had cleaned my inbox one Christmas and stacked the important messages with stars and labels that made sense to her. Clerk and recorder Travis County had sent an auto-reply 2 days ago. Your records request has been received. Beneath that, a link to a searchable index. I typed my name in and found the deed image and the affidavit Frank had signed to waive homestead rights back when Hope was the sort of furniture we owned. The images loaded in their pixelated official way. I saved them to the phone. Farther down, a message from DocuSign no one had opened stared at me from last week. Action required, signature requested. The subject line included my name and a loan number I didn't recognize. The body showed a big yellow Review Documents button and a paragraph about remote online notarization. At the bottom in small print, it listed an IP address for a prior view, not my home network. I might not remember my Wi-Fi password, but I know the last 4 of my own. I took a screenshot and saved it. I forwarded the email to myself again with a subject I'd recognize if I had to find it at 3 a.m. Keep this. I returned to the garage with a paper grocery sack and lifted 3 things into it: the quilt, the HELOC letter, the HOA notice. Back inside, I set them in a neat row on the dining table and laid the deed on top like a paperweight you can't buy. Jason and Brielle hovered in the doorway, doing that couple choreography where no one wants to stand too close to the mess. Evelyn Brielle started soft sharp. We were going to tell you everything. Jason stared at the edge of the table, the way a person studies the cliff they walked themselves toward. Mom, just listen. I said. The AC hiccuped again. Somewhere a neighbor's lawnmower coughed to life. I picked up the quilt, set it over the back of a chair, and smoothed it once with the flat of my hand until the fabric remembered it was allowed to breathe. Then I sat down and wrote the date in the top right corner of a yellow pad. Under it, I copied the timestamp from the doorbell footage, the bank's name, the words from the deed that said what was mine, and the 2 initials that had signed as witnesses the day I made it so. When the page was full, I tore it off and placed it on the stack. The house hummed and waited. I did not raise my voice. I did not move the chair. I kept making a list. Until the yellow pad looked like a path. Times names the shape of what people did when they believed a house would put up with anything. The front door opened without knocking. Nora doesn't knock. She grew up here. She stepped in with a travel mug and a windblown ponytail jeans and courthouse flats, a tote slung crossbody. She smelled like road coffee and rain that hadn't arrived yet. Hey, Mama, she said, and her eyes flicked once over the dining table deed quilt. Letters taking a picture faster than any phone. You okay? I'm writing it down, I said. That's being okay. She kissed my cheek and waved hello toward the kitchen where Jason and Brielle hovered like ornaments someone hadn't decided where to hang. Nora set her mug on a coaster and glanced at the quilt. The HELOC letter, the HOA notice, the Home Depot receipt I'd added on top. She touched each with a fingertip, the way you test a pie crust searching for give. May I? She asked the room, already opening her tote. She took out a slim laptop, a legal pad, with a margin full of tiny checkboxes and a blue pen. Brielle tried a smile that had worked on 100 brand managers. Nora, we were going to call you. We wanted to. Great, Nora said, and her tone was brisk without being cruel. Let's put everyone at the table. She pulled out chairs and didn't look back to see if anyone was sitting. The seats found their people. Jason sat opposite me, shoulders hunched like he was bracing for weather. Brielle chose the corner where the light caught her hair and made it kinder. Nora opened her laptop. The glow lit her cheekbones. Here's what we'll do, she said, eyes on the screen. We'll talk one at a time and I'll stop you when I need clarity. Do not touch your phones. This isn't court, but it's on the record. Brielle laughed once thin. On what record? Nora turned the laptop so Brielle could see the little red dot in the corner. Audio notes, she said. For Mom. For accuracy. Brielle's hand moved toward her phone, then stopped. Jason put both palms flat on the wood like it might float him. Nora nodded at me. Walk me through your list. I read what I'd written. 11:27 a.m. ATX Mobile Notary Porch. Neighborhood Trust, HELOC pending. DocuSign signature requested. IP address not ours. HOA notice unapproved exterior modification. Permit rejection missing owner authorization. I pushed the doorbell camera app across the table. Nora watched the notary clip twice, then the Brielle on the porch clip, then paused. Okay, she said. Jason, Brielle, either of you want to explain why a mobile notary came to the house while my mother was out of town? Brielle set her jaw. We needed a stamp for contractor paperwork, for fixtures. Homeowners do that all the time. For fixtures, Nora repeated. A notary for fixtures. She typed 2 words. The keys sounded like footsteps. Which contractor? A friend, Jason said. Guy from the job site. Name. He blinked. Rico. I don't know his last. You hired a contractor without a full name. Nora didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Never mind, we'll get there. She clicked to the DocuSign email on my phone. Who sent this? Neighborhood Trust, Brielle said. They pre-approved a line for improvements. It's very common. Nora read silently and then pointed to the bottom line. This IP address that the packet was viewed from. That's not this house. It's not Mom's phone. Is it yours? Jason scratched the back of his neck. Might be from the co-op. I was reading options. Reading options looks a lot like initiating the loan packet and routing a signature request to a person who doesn't use email much, Nora said. And if there was a mobile notary here, there would be a notary journal with the signer's name, which is not my mother's. Brielle folded her hands so tightly the knuckles went white. We were going to tell her. We thought if she saw it finished. The HOA notice says you didn't ask before changing the exterior, Nora cut in. The city says your permit app was rejected. That's two bodies saying the same thing unauthorized. Meanwhile, the bank believes a homeowner initiated a HELOC. It would have improved the value, Brielle said, quick hopeful. We invested. We can show receipts. Investment without authority is not equity, Nora said. It's a mess. Jason's stare drifted past the dining room to the wall where the photos used to climb. He looked small without those pictures holding him up. Nora flipped her legal pad to a fresh page. Her block letters were the kind you can read from the stove. Here's what I need you to confirm out loud. 1. Did either of you sign or submit any document purporting to be Evelyn Carter's signature? Jason's mouth open-closed. I didn't know it. Did you forward a DocuSign packet to a different address and then click approve on her behalf? Silence. Then Brielle said, we opened it. Nora waited. And I said. The air moved in and out of me like it belonged to someone else. And Jason clicked the box, Brielle said. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a confession she hoped would be counted as cooperation. Nora nodded like a flight attendant hearing the wrong kind of turbulence. 2. Did either of you present identification to a mobile notary as if Evelyn were present? No, Jason said. We had the notary for something else. Something else with the bank's name on it. For contractor lien waivers, Brielle offered. Lie easier, Nora said, and the line landed without heat. 3. Did either of you call my mother's insurer to request mortgagee clause language? Banks do that automatically, Brielle said. They do and they did. But somebody at this table primed the pump. Jason looked at his hands. I asked what info a bank would need. I didn't change anything. Nora made a neat slash on her pad like she was tallying votes. Okay, here's what happens now. You two will sign a written acknowledgement that every change you made here, cosmetic, structural, financial, was done without the owner's authorization. You will withdraw and disclaim any interest in the property. You will consent in writing to the bank that any application was made in error, that the signature is invalid, and that they are to close their file. Brielle blinked. We can't just cancel a line like, you can and you will, Nora said. You will also agree to vacate within 72 hours. You will take clothing and personal items. Furniture acquired during this improvement stays, as does anything paid with bank funds credit extended in this address's name or money you cannot document as your own. Jason looked up. You're kicking us out. I'm acknowledging a reality you created, Nora said. Brielle's chin lifted. We've invested thousands. We have rights. Not under this deed, Nora said, tapping the clause that had slept in my file box for a decade and woke up when it had to. Not in this county. Not with this paper. If you want to hand those receipts to a judge and argue that designer paint confers title, we can file. We can subpoena the notary. We can pull the RON logs. We can bring in the IP records from your co-working space. We can ask the HOA to testify that you were warned. But you will not like how much that costs to hear yourself lose slowly. Brielle's mouth tightened. You can't talk to me like I'm a criminal. I'm speaking to you like a person who made choices, Nora said. If you believe those choices were above board, you should be proud to sign a statement of what you did. Jason's voice came small. What about charges? Nora didn't look at him when she answered. If you comply, you leave with your clothes and no police report. If you don't, I call the bank and we go downtown. The room did a slow breath. The AC ticked in the attic. Out front, the delivery truck's brakes sighed. I folded the quilt and set it on the credenza. Brielle watched the move like it was a trade. We dry cleaned that, she said, as if kindness could be measured in solvent. Nora closed her laptop just enough to let it think. One more item. The content. What content? Brielle said too fast. Your videos, Nora said. The ones featuring this room, this house. You will remove them. You will not monetize images of spaces you altered without permission. You will sign a cease and desist acknowledging you'll keep the footage offline. I'm not arguing fair use on my mother's dining table. Brielle stared at this grain of the wood like she'd never seen it. Her eyes moved toward the ring light in the corner, then skittered away. Fine. Good, Nora said and opened the laptop again. Templates filled the screen as if they'd been waiting in a folder. She typed names, dates, the long and exact words that make a thing real. She slid the first printout across the table with a plain ballpoint. Read it. Jason read, lips moving. When he reached the clause about withdrawing any claim, his finger froze on the page. It says we have no rights. It says you agree you have no rights, Nora corrected, which reflects the truth. Sign and date. The pen hovered, then it found paper. Nora passed a second document to Brielle, a statement about the videos, about the HELOC, about the furniture. Brielle read faster, like speed could rewrite anything. Her signature was practiced pretty and finely small. Nora stacked the signed pages, clipped them, and placed them next to the deed. Keys, she said. Jason frowned. We live here. You did, Nora said. Leave your copies now. I'll swap the locks today. Brielle pulled a set from her bag and slid them forward. The gesture was surprisingly quiet. Jason hesitated, then took his keys off a ring, shaped like a tiny football, and set them down. The table accepted the sound. Nora looked at me and then back at them. We're not done with logistics, but we're finished for now. They stood at the same time, the way people do when a thing has ended without fanfare. Jason looked around the room, searching for walls that would speak up for him. Brielle smoothed her dress. Her phone lit face down. She ignored it. They walked to the stairs like each step was measuring them. Nora gathered the papers and slid them into a manila envelope. She wrote today's date on the tab, then the names, then dining table in capital letters, because sometimes you need to remember where the ground was when you stood still. She put the envelope under her palm and stayed there, feeling the weight more than the paper. You hungry? She asked without looking at me. I could eat, I said. In the kitchen, the skillet found heat the way it always had. Oil spread and warmed until it knew its job. I reached for the cast iron where it lives low, heavy, sure, and set it on the flame. Nora took plates down without moving the stack the way Brielle had arranged it. The room felt like it recognized us. Jason and Brielle's voices drifted faintly from upstairs drawers, opening a suitcase, zipping. Somewhere a hanger scraped the closet rod. The house carried the sounds without comment. Nora slid a plate toward me and leaned on the counter with her coffee. I'll make a couple calls after we eat, she said low enough the words belonged only to us. You write while it's fresh. I nodded and took up the yellow pad, again the tip of the pen finding the next clean line. The list grew by 2 names at a time, ink drying before I reached the period. The stove ticked as the cast iron settled, and the smell from the pan climbed the air familiar in a way that didn't ask permission. The skillet hissed, plates landed, and the yellow pad kept its corner of the table like a small courthouse. After lunch, Nora made 3 calls in a voice that belongs to people who know what time it is. Neighborhood Trust answered with canned music and a cheerful man who said his name twice. Nora gave the loan number from the letter and spelled my name the way the deed spelled it. Owner on the line, she said, and angled the speaker my way so I could say it myself. He verified a birthday, then another question I would never have remembered if Nora hadn't nodded first. We show a signature packet routed last week, he said. A mobile notary stamp recorded as pending, then reversed. Reverse it again, Nora said. The signer wasn't present. The IP address you logged isn't from our network. You're on notice that any purported consent is invalid, and you'll send written confirmation today that the application is closed, with no lien originated and no credit inquiries posted to this SSN. The man went quiet in the way keyboards do when someone is asking the screen for mercy. I can escalate to our fraud unit and suppress the trade line, he said finally. You'll get an email and a letter. Send both, Nora said, and thanked him like a person who knows gratitude is for files. She called the insurer next. Flag the policy, she said, and note that no mortgagee clause is authorized. If you receive another request, route it to me. Her pen made a neat box on the pad and filled it. Last, the HOA. A woman with a firm yet smiling voice answered on the second ring and pronounced her name as if it had a TM at the end. Nora read her the notice number and the photos described in the letter. The owner never approved fixtures or planters, she said. We'll restore or remove whatever your committee wants by the deadline. I'd also like written confirmation on letterhead that your office sent this notice to homeowner because you had no authorization from any other party. And please email your change of exterior policy packet to my address. The HOA woman warmed quickly to someone who spoke in bullet points. Of course, she said. We'll waive the fine if you remedy by Friday and return the porch light to original. We do appreciate when owners cooperate. We do too, Nora said, and drew another square to shade in. Upstairs, a suitcase zipper ran the length of a breath. Jason came down with a laundry basket of clothing, the kind you buy when you first leave home and never replace. He avoided my eyes and set the basket by the door like a dog laying down a shoe it shouldn't have taken. Brielle followed with a makeup case and the ring light folded under her arm. She moved as if the house were watching. I'll need the logins, Nora said, pointing at the laptop Brielle had left on the white desk. Your channel and the raw clip shot in my mother's bedroom. Brielle opened her mouth, found nothing useful, and nodded. I'll send credentials. Hand them over, Nora said, calm as a kitchen timer. We'll change the passwords and archive the files offline. Jason stood by the threshold, one hand on the jamb as if it could pardon him. I'll I'll take the rest later, he said. We'll book a motel. You'll return the garage door fob too, Nora said. He dug in his pocket and handed it over a small square surrender. By afternoon, the house had more of its old weight. I wiped the counters in circles the way you do when you're teaching your hands the room again. The ring light leaned inside the front door like a spare moon. Outside, the porch light I hadn't approved stared down at me, with an eye too bright for our block. Mr. Furman from church answered on the second try. You got a ladder, he said. I'll bring the socket set. He arrived in his work boots and a cap from a feed store no one in East Austin shops at anymore. We killed the breaker, eased the bright new fixture down, and set the old brass one back in place. Fits better, he said, wiping a thumb across the weathered metal. Looks like it remembers. Inside, I carried the quilt up to the master and set it on the mattress, waiting in the garage smell of things coming home. The white bed frame had been hauled out. The indentations in the carpet told a ghost story in rectangles. I opened windows and the day slid in with heat and cicadas. The gray walls took the sun and turned it cool. I rolled the first coat of peach, a shade that doesn't live in a fan deck but does live in my head. The roller left a wet stripe and the room took it patient. Nora brought up a glass of water and leaned on the doorframe. HOA packet came, she said, waving her phone. Restore front elevation and we're clear. She watched the paint edge into corners and made a small sound that might have been satisfaction. The bank sent the email she added. Fraud unit closed the file. They say no lien was opened and they'll scrub the inquiry. Good, I said, and didn't stop rolling. The tray made its soft saw sound as I passed over ridges. She set the phone on the dresser and pulled a folded envelope from her tote. Also drafted 2 things. A no trespass notice for Jason and Brielle, the statute numbers in the header, and a transfer on death deed in case we need a belt over the suspenders. She didn't say for who, the paper said enough. She placed a sticky flag where I'd sign if we filed. We worked until our shoulders told us when to stop. Downstairs, the contractor voicemail blinked on the landline I never unplugged out of stubbornness. A man with a frayed patience asked for payment and referenced a contract number that wasn't mine. Don't delete it, Nora said. I want that number. We ate on the porch steps while the last of the sun left the driveway. The old brass light threw a circle on the concrete that matched the circle in my chest. In the street, a teenager practiced a jump shot against a garage door that used to belong to someone I knew and now belongs to a couple I don't. The ball echoed steady. The next morning, an envelope slid through the mail slot with a slap that tried to sound official. The letterhead was from a firm with a name that tasted like mahogany heart and vine attorneys at law. Caroline's counsel if the return address wanted me to guess. Demand to permit access for inventory of personal investments. It read in a font that wears cufflinks. Nora sighed once through her nose and opened her laptop. Replying, she said. Her fingers placed a litigation hold on anything touching my name, cited a penal code section for forgery that reads, light until you're under it, and included the signed acknowledgments from yesterday with the fresh wet ink. She attached the HOA policy, highlighted the words owner authorization, and typed one last line about the doorbell footage with timestamps. She CC'd the firm's general inbox on purpose. Brielle's first email arrived an hour later with login credentials and a subject line that said per agreement like the way you label a bruise. Nora logged in, took screenshots of the dashboard, and pressed the buttons that turned channels into archives. She downloaded 2 gigabytes of White Room footage and set the folder on an external drive like a jar you label in a calm hand. At noon, the contractor stopped by with a clipboard that had lived in trucks. He knocked too hard and wore his sunglasses like a uniform. I need a signature, he said. You need the person who hired you, Nora answered. This is the owner. He looked over my shoulder and then back at the street, calculating whether he knew a cop. Somebody's paying this balance. Not from this address, Nora said, and handed him a copy of the HOA notice and the permit rejection. You installed without owner approval. If you push a lien, it will be invalid on its face, and I'll file to have it released with costs. You can take the cabinet pulls and the light you brought. They belong to you, not us. He considered the math of a fight and bent to pick up a box of hardware he hadn't meant to leave behind. Keep the paint, he said tight, as if he was offering a gift. He left the driveway with his tailgate down and his dignity up. By evening, the house had edges again. The old dresser's walnut pulls caught the last light and warmed the air by pretending to be the past. I rehung the Polaroid of Frank and me in our courthouse best. The glass caught my hand for a second and then settled. The face in the picture looked like a woman who would keep it together until there was time to fall apart, and then put it together again because the day wouldn't wait. Downstairs, Nora set 3 manila folders on the table, bank HOA notary, and slid the signed acknowledgments into notary as if the folders had always been labeled that way. She folded the keys Jason and Brielle had surrendered into a Ziploc and wrote their names on the bag with a date. The DoorDash bell rang and startled me into a laugh I didn't expect. The driver held up a paper bag and asked for Carter. We ate in the living room among the echo of a new emptiness, the kind that leaves room for furniture or quiet. After dishes, Nora took the spare set of locks from a drawer and set them on the counter. "I'll swap these now," she said, picking up the Phillips that fits our screws. She worked fast the way you do when your hands remember the weight of a thing and how to turn it. When she finished, she handed me a key and kept one for herself. The metal was cool and ordinary and heavier than it looked. I took it and put it on my ring where the tiny flashlight used to hang, where it balanced right between the grocery fob and the tag from the animal shelter the year we almost brought home a dog. The new key sat where a new key goes, next to a life that already has enough on it and still recognizes the sound of a door choosing to open. The new key turned clean. Mornings came simpler, AC breathing, porch light, quiet. The house shifting into its old posture. I kept the manila folders in a drawer by the phone with a pen that works. When I walked by the drawer, had that steady weight paper gives a room. 3 days after the locks, the bell over the cafe door sounded like a hinge that remembered oil. I chose the table by the window where you can see the bus stop and the barber with the painted pole that never spins. Jason came in without a jacket, though the air inside was cool. He looked a size smaller in the same sweatshirt sleeves pushed to his forearms like he was about to wash a car. "Mom," he said. "Jason." He stood a second too long and then sat like he'd been invited. He didn't reach for my hands. The cafe smell was beans and burnt sugar. The espresso machine coughed and cleared its throat. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. He took a folded envelope from his pocket, uncreased it once, and set it between us. "For you." I didn't pick it up. "What is it?" "Money, Iowa," he said. "It's not," he stopped himself. "It's cash. From selling tools. Receipts are inside." I slid the envelope to the edge of my placemat and left it there. He watched the move and nodded like a person who understands that taking a thing is not the whole of it. The barista brought a mug to me and a glass of water to him. Jason cupped the water like the glass could warm him. He looked at the window, not at me. "I started going to meetings," he said. "The kind where you tell a stranger the number you don't say out loud." I stirred sugar I didn't need. "All right. I'm working extra," he added. "Nights. I'm not going to ask to come back." He said it without angling for a reaction. "I know what I signed." I sipped the coffee and let it sit. The bus rolled past outside with its long sigh. On the bench, a woman in scrubs tied her laces with a knot that would make it through a shift. Jason exhaled. "I'm sorry." The words looked used, not new. He didn't push them toward me like a gift. He set them down like a book he'd carried too long. No excuse. I knew what I was doing. I picked the easiest wrong thing and told myself it was the smart one, that's all. The light on his face was the kind you get under a cafe awning at noon, honest, unflattering. I opened the envelope, counted without counting, and closed it again. The bills were rubber-banded with the tidy resignation of a pawn ticket. "We'll treat this as a payment," I said, "not a favor." He nodded. "Nora set up a ledger," he said. "I put my name at the top, not yours." We sat with the clink of cups and the door's small bell. A delivery guy wrestled a stack of milk crates through the narrow space and said sorry to every chair. Jason watched him like the choreography could teach him something. "Brielle signed," he said. "She took her videos down. She's staying with her mom." He paused. "We're not together." "All right," I said. He pressed his fingers to the water glass and then let go, leaving prints that looked like smudges until the light turned them into moons. "I know you don't want to hear about me," he said. "I just didn't want you to hear from someone else that I'm trying." "I hear you," I said. He nodded once small. "Can I ask one thing?" I waited. "Can I come by Saturday to pick up the last box from the garage?" he said. "It has my yearbooks and the tool belt Grandpa left me. I'll text first. I'll wait on the curb if you're not home." "You can come at 10, I said. "Nora will be there." "Thank you," he said. He didn't look relieved so much as oriented, like a person who finally sees a street sign after a wrong turn. We both stood at the same time because that's how tables let you leave. He didn't offer a hug. He reached for his wallet and I let him pay for the coffee. Outside, the heat was working on the day. He looked toward the bus and then toward where he'd parked out of habit, as if having a car were a thing you could think back into your pocket. He squared his shoulders the way men do when they want a different shape. "Take care," I said. "You too," he answered and went. At home, the porch smelled like last night's rain, even though there hadn't been any. The brass fixture held its place. I set the envelope in the bank folder and wrote the amount and the date on a line Nora had drawn. The pen's tip made the paper sound that says a thing is fixed. I took a sponge to the stair wall. The white squares where frames used to hang had started to ghost through the gray, and I scrubbed until the marks set back. In the master, the peach had dried into itself. I lifted the quilt onto the bed and smoothed the seam where two dresses met in the shape of a spring I can still name. When I lay my palm flat, the cotton warmed. The doorbell camera chimed with a package I hadn't ordered a brown box from a shop in Waco, my name spelled right. Inside, tissue paper and a small cedar box with a sliding lid. No note. The smell pushed out clean and remembered. Under the lid, Frank's pocket watch lay against a folded handkerchief with my initials stitched in a younger hand. The watch face had been buffed. The ding at 11 looked softened, not erased. The chain had a new clasp. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tick settle in my wrist. I didn't wind it. I listened until the quiet let it be a watch again instead of a story. The front yard needed edging. Mr. Fermin's ladder leaned against the fence, waiting to be returned. Kids shouted somewhere 2 blocks over where somebody's backyard has a trampoline. A dog barked at a squirrel that didn't care. The house took the afternoon and settled deeper into its footing. Saturday at 10, Jason texted from the curb. Nora stood in the doorway behind me while he carried the box out. He didn't ask to use the bathroom or for a glass of water. He nodded at the brass light and said it looked better, which is not an apology and not nothing. He lifted a hand to Nora. She lifted hers back at a shoulder height. The box rode the passenger seat with the belt clicked ridiculous and right. When the tires turned the corner, the block held his absence without strain. Nora stood with me a minute under the heat that lifts off sidewalks like a thought you can't catch. We didn't say anything. The door closed with the sound I know better than my own voice. Inside the house smelled like coffee and paint and wood that has been sanded twice. I put the cedar box on the dresser and the watch on top of it, chain tucked in like a shirt. The manila folders waited in their drawer, not loud, not shy. I made a list on the yellow pad of what groceries we were out of, and what screws had worked loose on the porch, and which neighbor I owed a ladder to. The pen moved the line filled, and the windows held the light where I wanted it. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.